Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of So Chatty. This is episode number 173, and it's February the 7th, 2025, and 1 week from today is Valentine's Day. Bah humbug. Yeah, just a commercial holiday. It's not even a holiday. That restaurants and candy places and flower places and card places and all that stuff make guys feel guilty if they don't get something for their wife, girlfriend, or significant other. I meant. But whatever.
Or all three.
Or all three. Yeah, in some cases it can get expensive. Really. It's a dozen roses going for these days, long stem. Probably like $150 or more. Well, it's probably more than that. But whatever. If you had a 3D printer, you could print your own roses. Ask me how I know.
Yeah, would that be cheaper?
Yeah, it probably would be. Just plastic. Doesn't use that much plastic. I have some. But you'll have to wait to see those because I don't know. No, I think I showed them on this past week's vlog. Either that or I'm going to show them on this week's vlog. I can't keep it straight. Anyways, I digress as I often do. So, what have we been up to? Well, I just have to find it. Okay. Walter made me do things before we went on. I was all prepared, and then he decided, okay, I can't find the bloody
It's right at the bottom there.
I know, but it doesn't show up. Anyways, let us get...
Make a different color or something.
Why don't I tried that? Didn't help. Even tried to make it big, and then just filled up the whole screen. And I don't know why that's on the screen. It's all this on the screen. Oh yeah, this should be on the screen. Okay, I think I've got the act together. I've been sewing all day. My brain is putty right now. Don't even think it. Okay, so I'm just showing you my design wall. And because none of these things are done, you know that I have been doing some pattern writing, and I put together one that I'm going to release probably at retreat time. And that's what those blocks, those 4 blocks off to the left are. Because if you saw the Idiot Quilter this week, you know that I had a little problem with that one at the bottom with the star off the edge. That's the way it's supposed to look. When I got the quilt top done, thank goodness I hadn't quilted it yet, I had turned that block the wrong way, and it looked like a little sailboat. Walter didn't catch it at first, but then he did, and then other people caught it too. Now, I had a couple of ways I could correct that problem. One of the ways, of course, is to rip it out, but there are 1, 2, 3 times 4, 12 of them. And there's a couple of borders on that piece as well. And well, I analyzed it and looked at it. And if I was to try to rip out each block, even just around the block, it would take me longer to do that and try to fix it than it would to do the whole quilt again and making sure those blocks are correct. So that's why there's blocks sitting there, because I'm redoing the quilt. So I was just testing out my color scheme with those. And yeah, so that's...
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Always. Somebody wrote in the comments, you should get Walter to look at all your quilts before you start to finalize them. He probably will catch the mistakes then. Lots of confidence in me, people. Yeah, none. Okay, fine. Yeah, maybe I should. I don't know. But the other one that's in the middle is actually the quilt I'm working on for Stephanie's retreat in the spring. And actually, I have it further done than what you're seeing there, because that's what I was working on all day today to get that finished up. I have made this quilt now. I'm testing the pattern out for about the 3rd time to make sure there's no mistakes in it. Somebody's going to find something in the pattern, I am sure, when I teach it, but I'm prepared for that, because pattern writing, hard, very hard. Anyways, that's what I've been up to. And I did these, oops, back up. I did these just as a palette cleanser. They were on sale, I think, Designs by Juju. I don't like them. Quite frankly, I don't like them. They're freestanding lace, eggs, and a bunny. And they're very loosely woven. You can see in there. And like the one on the end with the green border, that sucker just crumbles up. It's loose. I don't like how they designed it. It's too loose a weave for freestanding lace. Even the rabbit, he looks a little better, but there's too many open spaces. It's not done very in a very tight manner. So I don't recommend this pattern. Good thing it was on sale. I thought it was a cute idea. You could put them on gifts or make them into keychains or whatever, but I don't recommend it. I don't think it's one of their better freestanding lace patterns. It's just too loose, a weave. So Walter, oh wait, yeah, Walter finished his. Well, he hasn't got a backing on it yet, do you?
No.
No. But this is why I was a little flustered when we first came on, because just as we sat down, I was going to hit the record button. Walter says, we should have a picture of the two of them side by side. Okay, so we do. So mine's on the right. His is on the left with his hand holding it up there on the wall. Now, yeah, his looks like it's bigger. It's not, because right now he hasn't put a backing on it, and the seam allowance will, like,
Yeah.
you know, curl that under, kind of a thing. So the same size. We really didn't consult each other on as far as fabric colors were concerned.
Yeah, thread colors or fabric colors. Now, we both used a guide.
Yeah.
That was supplied in the instructions as far as colors went and stuff like that. It's like thread colors and that. I did change a few of my thread colors compared to what they were suggesting. And only because I didn't like the colors they decided to give me.
And you used solid fabrics, didn't you?
I used, well, they were a little mottled, but they're not. They are pretty much solid.
Whereas I use some patterned ones
Yeah.
with the dots on them and that kind of thing. But you can see, same pattern, but two different looks. And I encourage you, if you do one of these, use their instructions as a guide. Don't feel you have to pick exactly the fabrics and the thread colors they're using. You do you with it. But it's like quilts. When you go into a quilt store and they've got quilts up and they say there's kits or classes available, some people, they see it and they want to do it exactly with the same fabrics, the whole bit as the one on display. Other people, like me, for example, I go and go, yeah, I don't necessarily want those fabrics. I think I want to do it in something different.
Yeah, like, I mean, we both sort of did follow the guideline where the horse with a thing on the left, it was a purple color, and the thing in the middle is a blue color, and the cat on the end is an orange color, and the other cat on the other end is a pink color. So we did sort of follow that.
Yeah, we followed their guide for this.
But we picked our own fabric.
But we picked our own fabrics for it and our own threads as well, although we just use it as a guide. And I mean, that's up to you. You know, some people are not comfortable going away from the instructions too far. Other people decide that, no, they have other choices that suits them better. There isn't a right or wrong way. You do you, whatever you like. But anyways, the two of them here, once he gets his backing on, the two of them will hang together on the wall, going down to our rec room, down here into the sewing room kind of a thing. Mine's already in its place, but I have a place for Walter's too, when he gets it done.
Soon.
Walter has finishing anxiety, I think, on a lot of things, you know. So anyways, yeah, soon. I'll just keep nagging him about it. So yeah, that's what we have been up to. And let's see, what else do we have? Oh yeah, upcoming things here. I don't know if I have it. I think I have, or do I have? No, I have it. I have to go to it. As you remember, I did a gnome. Well, he's right behind my head. He's hanging up there. The gnome wall hanger, the Valentine's one. Well, Designs by Juju's coming out with one of these for each of the seasons, and they've just come out with the St. Patty's Day one, and I bought it. It was on sale. There it was, $8.50 US, so half price basically. And I bought it, and I've picked out my fabrics for him as well, and they're really easy and quick to do once you've done one. And he'll work the same way as the other gnome. In fact, the only different, well, the hats are different, and one's holding a heart, and this guy, he's holding a shamrock or whatever. So yeah, that's a project I'm going to get to. And I don't know if I'm going to record this one or not. I don't know if that's overkill because, I mean, I already recorded what you're going to see today. Because that's what today's episode is about, is how to do one of these from beginning to end. So if you would like to see me do make a video of doing the St. Patrick's one, let me know in the comments below after you've seen today's Valentine's gnome. Okay, so announcements. Sewing with Stephanie and Stephen Wednesdays, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Start time, come and go as you please. Links in the show notes. Pop-up Sew Day this Saturday, February the 8th. Virtual doors open at 8 a.m. Eastern Time, and we run from 8 till 5. No, Walter won't be with us for that. He's going off to a sew day. What are you going to work on your sew day?
Probably a shirt.
A shirt.
Probably because a couple of the other ones are working on a shirt too, and I probably end up helping them out.
Oh, yeah, because now you're the expert of shirt making. You're going to upstage Brandon, who's
Not really.
instructor.
I mean, Brandon can do it too.
Yeah, yeah, he does a lot of things. But so Walter will not be at the pop-up sew day. One reason why I'm having it this Saturday, because I'll be here all by my lonesome, and I don't like to be here all by my lonesome. So you guys will come and join me, and we'll have a good time. The link for it is in the show notes below, and those of you on the mailing list, you got it already. In fact, you may have gotten it multiple times because I made a boo-boo. And I already sent out an email about the boo-boo. I forgot to put it in the blind carbon copy. I had a couple of people that were very annoyed with me because I made a mistake. I guess they're absolutely perfect. They've never made a mistake in their lives, so I stand corrected. Okay. But speaking of sewing alone, I started an experiment, and I think I'm going to carry on with it. And that's what I call Sewing and Musings with Stephen. And I did the first one on Tuesday and put it up. And just to see what would happen. And basically, it's me in the sewing room working on a project and just talking about whatever comes to my mind. It's kind of stream of consciousness in a sense. But I did mention on that, if you liked it or wanted me to do more, let me know. Or if you didn't like it, let me know. Well, I've had overwhelming positive comments about it. People like it. And they said the reason being is, even though it's not live, it's like there's somebody with them when they're alone and they're sewing. It gives them some company. And that was my idea behind it. It's a little strange to be talking to myself, but then that's not that strange. I do that a lot. So I answer myself too. So I will do it again. I don't know when. These will be infrequent, meaning I will not put them on a regular schedule. I don't know if I'll do them once a week. I don't know if I'll do them once a month or every other week. I guess I'll do them when the mood hits me, that I think, hey, this might be a good opportunity to do sewing and sewing and musings episode. So thank you to all of you that let me know what you thought. And if you haven't seen it yet and you're bored and you're sewing and you want company, put it on. You might still be bored, but you can let me know about that. Okay, next week, hopefully, we're going to start the bag making. Still haven't figured out how we're doing this because I know what I want to do, but I'm not sure how I work him in to show the way he makes bags. I don't know if we do one type of bag, the in the hoop bag first, then we move over to Walter's technique. I don't know if I'll make a bag with Walter or he'll make a bag with me in the hoop. We have to discuss this. My people have to meet with his people and they'll do lunch and hash this all out and then let us know what we're going to do. Yeah. So hopefully we can start that in one form or another for next week's episode of So Chatty. The bag that I'm going to make in the hoop, though, I'll show you it. In case you want to sort of sew along, it's not going to be basically a sew along, but this is called the Quilted Patchwork Handbag in several different sizes. I'm going to make the largest size. It's on Sweet Pea Designs. It's $18.19 Canadian, so that means it's about $1.50 American right now. And it has all the instructions and everything. And basically, I've picked out my fabrics I'm going to use. But the your machine, your embroidery machine is going to do all of the quilting on whatever fabrics you pick, and it'll also sew these pieces all together for you with decorative stitches. And you make it in panels. But the machine, now I'm not sure, I haven't looked at the instructions all the way through, but once I've done in the past, the machine will be set up in such a way, the files, that you'll be able to sew right in the embroidery machine these panels, these larger panels, together. So I imagine that's the way it's designed too. You'll still have to do some domestic sewing machine sewing, like when it comes to lining the bag and making your handles and putting those on, and probably the bottom of the bag too. I noticed in the picture here, it looks like they've got a faux leather type bottom to it. But I think it's kind of interesting. It's cute. It's a bag that, you know, it's really not seasonal. And it would make a great gift for somebody who might be a sewer or a quilter in your life if you're thinking of doing these kind of things as a gift, or even as just for something for yourself. So that's the one I'm going to work on to start with this. So if you, I put a link in the show notes. If you're interested and you want to get it for yourself as well, then you can do that.
I wouldn't mind trying that bag too.
Well, fine. Buy your own pattern. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll give you a copy of the pattern. One time about it. So, okay, so I think we have a plan for next week then. Okay, good. All right, fine. That solves a lot of problems. Okay. So, anything else? Yeah. I think that's all on announcements and what's coming up. So, as I told you, I have done a complete video. I have fast forwarded some spots and jumped ahead with it, but on how to do the gnome that you see over here, up here, how to do him in the hoop machine embroidery and everything you need for that. So that video is going to be the bulk of today's So Chatty, so I'm going to stick it in here and then we'll come back. So I was scanning through Designs by Juju the other day, and I came across this Gnome's Valentines hanging. And at first I thought, no, I've got enough projects. I don't need another one. But it's a gnome, and it's stinking cute, and it was on sale. So I had to have it. So what I'm going to do is show you how you go about making one of these, because as usual, the instructions that often come with these kind of things, I find I don't do what they want you to do. Now, I can see right off the bat that this one is using some sparkly vinyl in it, and I don't think I will be doing that, although I may have some mylar here, which I might attempt. We'll see. But let's just go through this pattern. As I said, it's a design by Juju, it says it right there, and it's called the Gnome Valentine's Wall Hanging. And he comes in several different sizes, a 5x7, finish size is 7x13, or a 6x10 hoop, which will produce an 8x15, an 8x12 hoop that'll produce a 10x19, and a 9.5x14 hoop, which will produce a 13x24. I am not sure if I can do this one or not. But that's the one I'll probably be aiming for. But right now, I just want to analyze the instructions. So here you have the list of supplies for each size, and there are different pieces. Oops, sorry. There are different pieces. We have a hat top, a hat band and nose, beard and the heart, pants and feet, and buttons. And buttons are something you sew on later on to hold it together. You have the option. You can either use buttons, or if we go back here to the picture, you see there's buttons here that hold the pants on to the beard, and there's 4 buttons up here that hold this top part together. Or you could just sew them. It's up to you, whichever you like. The buttons maybe add a little bit of a 3D embellishment effect to it. And if that's what you want, then sure, use some decorative buttons on this. So just looking at this, how they set this up, and this is pretty much standard for most designs by Juju when it comes to doing a wall hanging. They'll show you up here in the chart the different sizes of the hoops, and they tell you what size of fabric you need. Now, I just usually use these as a guideline. I don't actually cut my pieces out exactly these than these sizes. I don't take the time. And a lot of times I'm using scrap fabric or fat quarters for one of these designs. So, you know, it's not that important to me, but it does give me a guide as far as how much I'm going to need. So I need some batting, I need some background fabric, and a backing fabric as well. The backing fabric goes on the back of this piece so you don't see all the stitching. And similarly with the rest of them, it tells you here for each of the pieces. Now they do say here, note, SF101 added to background fabric to prevent puckering when stitching out applique pieces to the block. I never do that, and I never have any problem. The trick here is to make sure you have enough layers of your stabilizer, and we'll come to that in a second. They also say if you're using fluffy batting, place muslin on top of batting before tack down. This will make it easier when cutting the different fabric applique pieces. Again, not something that I do, haven't had any problems. Okay, so they're going to start with the hat top, and basically all of the instructions will be pretty much the same, just for different pieces. And they tell you to choose the design and load design in the machine. It says before starting, please double check that you've loaded the correct design size, because you will have the different sizes listed. It'll come up on your screen of your embroidery machine. So yeah, you double check to make sure that you've got the right size each time. You don't want to print one piece that's larger and then one piece that's smaller, because it's not going to work. They say to hoop 2 layers of water-soluble stabilizer, and yes, I definitely will be doing that. It says using 2 layers will make sure it doesn't rip through while stitching. Okay, good to know. Then you stitch the placement line for the batting, and then you lay down your batting, and then you trim the batting up close to the stitches without cutting the stitches, of course. You don't want to do that. And then it says add front and back of hat. Take the hoop off the machine, turn to the back side, place hat backing fabric over the placement lines. Secure in place with tape, turn hoop to the right side and return hoop to machine. Cover batting with front fabric, stitch the tack down line, then take the hoop back off the machine and trim the fabric. So you're putting both the top fabric and the backing fabric on at the same time. And they say tape it down. I just use masking tape, and that seems to work very well for that. And then it says the next few stitching steps are the satin stitch for the hat, which go all the way around the outside. It says refer to color chart, include it with download for satin and design stitching sequence. There's usually a chart that breaks down all the different colors of thread that they are suggesting you use. And I say suggesting because you can use whatever you want. Then it says take the hat out of the hoop and trim away the stabilizer as close as possible without cutting the satin stitches. And then you just take it and you put it in some water. It says use a wet cotton swab to remove the leftover stabilizer around the outside edge. I just submerge the whole thing in a basin of water for about 30 seconds, swish it around, take it out, and then let it air dry. And then if anything puckers up a little bit, I just give it a nice steam press, and that's fine. I have tried this with Q-tip, and it's monotonous. And it doesn't hurt it to go into the fabric. You know, if it's cotton, if it's quilting cotton, you're fine. It's not going to bleed. If you're in doubt, though, you might want to test it to make sure. This is using cutting tool to open the button and ribbon hole on the hat. Okay, now at this point, it does put in a spot for the buttonhole. You can skip over that buttonhole if you intend to just stitch the whole thing together. I think I probably will skip over that because I find cutting open the buttonholes and putting in the buttons and sewing them on is a bit tedious, and I don't care for the look. And really, the rest of these instructions follow the same thing. You've got the next is the hat band and nose. Then you have the beard and heart, and pants and shoes. And then they come to the gnome construction. And here they're telling you lay out the gnome parts to form the body. Sew buttons over all the stitched X's. And so here, when you see those X's, you know where to actually just sew if you're not going to use the buttons. And then they suggest to hang the gnome. There's a one hole on the top of the hat. Cut through the hole. Use tape on the ends of string or ribbon to thread it through the hole. And I do that as well. And assemble the gnome by inserting all the buttons through the coordinating buttonholes, and the gnome is complete. And that's all there is to this project, and it's pretty simple. So we'll go back here to the opening page. And I think it's really cute. So the next thing I need to do now that I've gone through and analyzed the instructions, is I need to pick out my fabrics for this. And I like what the colors they are using. The reds, and I got to find some fleshy colored fabric for the hands and the nose, white for the beard, blue for the pants, and probably brown. I'll use some kind of brown fabric for in here. They're using, it looks like, a vinyl. Um, I don't think I have any vinyl, any colored vinyl. I'll have to look in my stash, but that's okay. Um, I'll be happy with just using the quilting cotton as well. And I like the idea of a patterned fabric here for the hat top, and I might use a patterned fabric for the pants as well. And we'll see, maybe even a white with a little bit of texture like look to it too. So I'm going to go off and I'm going to find my fabrics for this, and I'll show you what I picked out for that. So I've picked my fabrics and my threads for this project. So starting with the top, his hat, the hat with the peak on it, and then the little piece that comes down over his eyes in these reds. And then the pinky color I'm going to use for his hands and his nose. And I'm going to use the white for his beard that has a little bit of a dot texture to it. Then for his pants, I'm going to use this bluey, purpley, polka dotty kind of fabric. And then for his shoes, I'm going to use the gray. And I've got my threads for each of those, as you can see right here. Now I didn't pull out the white, and I'll be using black thread as well, but those are always over in my stand, always, because you use those a lot. So I have everything together. I know the hoop size for this. I was going to do the 9.5 by 14, as it says here, but they're missing some pieces for that. And I'm not sure if they intend to use the 8 by 12 pieces to go with this. I'm just going to stick to the 8 by 12, which finishes at almost 11 by 20. So that's a pretty good size. So I'm going to get my threads all hooked up to my machine and get my stabilizer, water soluble stabilizer, hooped, and away we'll go. One more fabric that I picked out that I forgot about is my backing fabric that'll go on the back side of each of these pieces. So I just picked a gray because no one's going to really see the back. It's more or less there just to cover up the stitching on the back. And I have my 2 layers of my water soluble stabilizer hooped up so we can start the first part, which is the hat top. Okay, so what we're going to do first is stitch our placement line for the batting. So I've got it loaded with red thread. I could have put any color in at this stage, but I just figured I'll use red because I am going to be using the red once I've got fabric laid down, and I'm going to put the satin stitch around it. So let's turn this on, and away it goes. So once this is finished, I'm going to lay my batting down to cover that placement line, and then I will trim it. And there we go. So now we can lay down our batting. Make sure all the entire line is covered. And we stitch the tack down again. So we'll let this finish up and then we'll take the hoop out and I'll show you how to trim the fabric. One more fabric that I picked out that I forgot about is my backing fabric that'll go on the back side of each of these pieces. So I just picked a gray because no one's going to really see the back. It's more or less there just to cover up the stitching on the back. And I have my 2 layers of my water-soluble stabilizer hooped up so we can start the first part, which is the hat top. So I've put my backing fabric, the gray, on the back of this, and I can see through the water soluble just to make sure there are no folds. Sometimes when you slide the hoop in, you can get a corner of your fabric will come undone and fold underneath, and you don't want that. But I'm looking good here. And now I'm going to put the top fabric on. Just slip it underneath the needle, the foot of the needle foot. You know what I mean. Okay. Smooth that out. So it's all nice and covered. Now we're going to do the tack down. So this is going to attach this. And then when it is finished this, I'm going to take the hoop off again and I'm going to trim the top fabric and the backing fabric close to the line, just like I did with the padding. And then we'll come back and do the next stitch. So I've trimmed the fabric all out on both the front and the back, and now we're ready for the satin stitch. And I'm keeping it the same color because I'm using red for this. So the first thing it does is it outlines the whole shape, and then it'll come back and start the satin stitch, which is going to take some time because according to the time that shows up on my screen, it says that this whole piece takes about 45 minutes to do. And we've got about 40 more minutes to go. And we're at the second last stitch or color change. So yeah, it'll take a while. I'm not going to have you sit all the way through this. I will let you see it start the satin stitch, and then we'll cut away and come back to when it has the satin stitch completely done. And now it's doing a zigzag stitch to secure all the edges of the fabric. And it's doing this on both the front and on the back at the same time. But I don't change my bobbin. I'm using a white bobbin for this, and that'll be fine because no one's going to see the back. And for the most part, I find that the top thread usually gets pulled over onto the back side enough that you don't really realize that there is not the same color in both the top thread and the bobbin thread. So we'll let this do its thing, and I'll come back when it gets close to the end of this stage. Okay, so it has finished doing the satin stitch, which took about 40 minutes to do. And it did a nice little design within the satin stitch as well. And that's one reason why it takes a little longer. It's just not a plain satin stitch. It has a little design embedded into it as well. It's also done 2 little marks on here, which are guides for the buttons or the buttonholes. But as I said, I'm probably just going to stitch those pieces to hold them together, but at least I'll know where I should attach them. So now I'm going to release it from the hoop. I'm going to trim the stabilizer away from it, and then I'm going to take the whole piece and I'm going to submerge it in my bathroom sink for about 30 seconds and swish it around to dissolve the stabilizer. Now, the more stabilizer I leave in this, the stiffer the piece will be, and I do like these pieces stiff. So then after I've taken it out of the basin of water, I'm going to blot it between 2 layers of paper towels. I might hit it with the iron just a little bit to press it. And then I'm going to take it out of the paper towels and I'm going to lay it over by my ironing on my wool mat and just let it air dry, which usually takes a couple of hours for it to be done. In the meantime, I'll carry on with the next piece. So now I have stitched down the placement line for the hat band and the nose, and I'm about to put the stabilizer over top of that. And we'll just let that stitch that out, and then we'll trim it. Basically the same procedure as we did with the first piece. And I'm, by the way, using scraps of battleizer. If I have scraps that are big enough, I don't throw out my scraps because this battleizer is expensive. And you can often use the smaller pieces for smaller things like I'm using right now. So we'll let that finish stitching out, and then we'll trim it as we did with the other one using our duckbill applique scissors. And we'll move on to the next stage after that. Now I've trimmed the top fabric, but at this stage they want you to put the backing fabric underneath the hoop, like we did before. Why they didn't do these two parts at the same time, I really don't know, because they did on the first one. But nevertheless, I'm doing what they said to do. I floated my backing fabric underneath the hoop as opposed to taping it down this time. You can do that. Just make sure that your fabric doesn't get folded over onto itself, because then you'll have a problem. So it's just a step that I sometimes don't bother with in terms of the taping of it, because the tape sometimes gets stuck onto the table of the embroidery machine, and that can cause a little bit of a problem. Not usually a major one if you're careful, but I didn't do it this time. So it's doing that. Then we'll take the hoop off and we'll trim that backing fabric off like we did before. The machine did a placement line for the nose piece of fabric, so now I'm going to put my nose fabric over those lines and let it do the tack down. Now, I could have changed the color of my thread over to the pink for this, but because it's going to be a satin stitch, it's going to cover up this red line, so I'm not going to worry about it. And once it's finished this, then I'm going to take it off the machine and I'm going to trim the fabric around the nose piece. So now the machine is preparing this piece for the satin stitch that's going to go all the way around the headband part. And so what it does first is it outlines the whole thing in a single stitch. It'll go back and do sort of a zigzag stitch over that, and then it'll do the satin stitch on top of that. So this is a process that does take some time. And according to the machine, I've got about 37 minutes left to go with this. So I'm not going to have you sit through all of this while it's doing it, but we'll come back. So now we're going to the nose and we're doing a satin stitch around that. And this is the first time I have switched colors in my thread. Up to this point, I've been using red thread. Now I'm switching over to a pink thread to do the satin stitch around the nose piece. And it says I need to put in a new bobbin, which happens. I do have a bobbin sensor on this machine, and I keep my bobbins pretty close in the drawer right below here. So we just pop in another bobbin. It only takes seconds to do so. Put the hook back in, and we should be fine to go. And so it's doing a zigzag around this, and then we'll come back and it will do the satin stitch all the way around the nose. And then after that, it just needs to put in a couple of, it needs to put in the buttonholes where you cut them. But I'm not going to put the buttonholes in this, because I said before, I don't want to use buttons with this one. I want to just stitch the pieces together. So we'll let that finish out, and we'll go from there. Okay, I've already done the batting. It's underneath this piece. It's been trimmed away, and now we're putting on the beard piece of fabric. So we're just covering up placement line that was already stitched out, and using white thread, we'll have this do the tack in. And we will trim this off and carry on to the next stage. So you can see that most of the procedures here are the same after the first piece, just a different shape. That's all it is. But it's the same technique, same procedure. that you do for pretty much everything in this particular piece. So we'll let that sew out. So now we're doing the placement line for, well, we've already done the placement line for the heart. And you can see I'm going to use the same fabric as I used in the top hat, the top part of the hat for the heart as well. So this is just placing that fabric down, tacking it down, then I'll trim it. Then it's going to do a placement line for the hands. And then I'll lay the fabric down and it'll tack that down. And then I'll trim those and then we'll be ready to do the satin stitching on here. Actually, I think there's one step before the satin stitch. There's the backing fabric that goes on the underneath side of the hoop. And I think I'll do the same thing as I did last time. I'm just going to float that underneath the hoop. I won't worry about trying to tape it down. So the satin stitch is finished on the heart and on the hands. And before we do the satin stitch all the way around on the beard, we're going to put the backing fabric on. And so we're putting right side down. And I'm just going to float this. You could take the hoop out and tape it, but I don't think it's necessary. This will work. And I've got pink thread loaded in here right now. And yeah, I think I will put in the white because the next change is going to be for white for the satin stitch around the beard. So we'll just thread this with white thread. And it's going to do a stitch all the way around this to hold down the backing. And once this is finished, I will remove the hoop from the machine, flip it over, trim the backing fabric close to the thread, put the hoop back in, and do the satin stitch all the way around the beard. And I'll come back and show you what that looks like. So the satin stitch is done on this piece, and this piece is now completed. Now there was another step, but I skipped it. It was going to put a buttonhole down here on each side for attaching it to the pants. But I'm just going to sew them, so I'm not putting in the buttonholes. So I skipped over that step, but I did let it do the little marks, which are hard to see on camera, but there's two little marks here for guiding the sewing of the top part to this part. So those I did leave because they'll serve as a guide for me. Okay, so now I'm going to take this to the sink. I'm going to first of all take the hoop out. I'm going to trim all the way around here my stabilizer, take it to the sink, let it sit in warm water for about 30 seconds, swish it around, and then blot it with a paper towel and let it sit and air dry. And we'll go on to the next piece. So we're on the last piece, and this is the pants and the shoes. And right now the machine is stitching out the placement line for the pant fabric. I have the batting on here too. This will also serve as the cutting line for the batting. So when this is finished, I will take the hoop off the machine. I will trim the batting. I will put down my fabric for the pants and let it do its thing. It will also do out the stitch line, placement line for the shoes, and the whole thing is the way that all the other pieces work. It's a really easy procedure. So we'll come back when we're getting into the satin stitch of these parts closer to the end. So I have all the pieces done of the Gnome Valentines wall hanging, and they are just sitting here and they're drying. So once they're all dry, I'm going to sew the pieces all together, and I'll use those little indicator marks that were sewn onto each piece. I'm not using buttons, as I've said before. I'm just going to sew them directly on, probably with invisible thread, and it'll be done, and I'll show you the end product then. So I have all the parts of the Gnome Valentine's wall hanging all sewn together. I just sewed them together with invisible thread. I didn't use the buttons, as I mentioned before, and I think he turned out pretty cute. And he hangs up here on my door next to some of my other things. And yeah, so that is how you do one of these. And there are many different ones to choose from. You may remember the American cousin to Uncle Sam, or the Canadian cousin, I mean, to Uncle Sam. This is Uncle Bob. And he was done in the same way as the Gnome Valentine one. So have some fun making these wall hangings. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that video clip. And as I said, I have the St. Patrick's Day one. If you want me to make a video similar, I mean, you do them in a similar way. They're just a different character and different fabrics, that's all. But if you'd like me to do a video again about that, I can put it in the comments below and I will consider it. All right, just before we go, we had actually a question this week from a subscriber, from Betty. She says, I recently looked up why my embroidery thread is breaking and came across a video where the lady dips her thread reels in mineral oil. I was wondering if you've ever heard of this and have you tried it? Well, my first gut reaction to this was, I have never heard of that and I wouldn't try it for a variety of reasons. And I wrote back to her and said, if your thread is breaking a lot, there's several things you can check. Like, one, what kind of thread are you using? If you're buying cheap stuff from the dollar store, you're going to have thread breaks. But if you're using brand name threads, there is a possibility not all machines like all threads. They're temperamental about it. So maybe try a different brand of thread with it. Have you threaded your machine properly? You know, you may have been threading your machine for years, but you want to know something? You sometimes pick up bad habits. It's automatic. You just go ahead, thread it. You don't even think about it, but maybe you've missed a step and you've been repeating that step.
Yeah, actually, I started when I first got my embroidery machine. I was getting a lot of thread breaks, and I went back to the manual and realized I was not threading it properly.
Yeah, I've done the same thing. Something triggers in your mind or blocks out, and you think you're doing it right, and it's usually the simplest thing. And you go, well, I'm an idiot. Why did I do that? So it doesn't hurt to get out your manual or find a YouTube video and review how to thread your machine. The other thing that might be breaking your thread is maybe you've got the wrong size needle for the wrong size threads. You've got to match those up. Or you haven't changed your needle in a long time. You should change your needle.
Yeah, especially on embroidery. Embroidery tends to go through needles quickly. Yeah. And the other thing I found too is I sometimes use big spools and stuff like that. Sometimes the thread snags on your spool. And the thread snags on your spool, it yanks, and it'll break your thread that way too.
And you might not even notice that it's happened with me on my embroidery machine, because on the Floriani spools there is a little cut, just a fine little cut, the width of a thread on the base, and the idea is to hold your thread there when you're not using it, when you roll it up and then you put it in there. But that can be rough, and if your thread loops down near the bottom, it can get caught on that. And usually I've had it where it's actually picked up my whole spool of thread and thrown it right out off the spool, went flying, and that's why it happened. But that'll break your thread too, but it may be subtle.
And it could also be that you haven't cleaned your bobbin in a long time, or your bobbin case, underneath your bobbin case, your machine might need oiling. There's all kinds of things.
If you wind your own bobbins, now this is more so for an embroidery machine, but she didn't really specify that it was an embroidery machine or not. Oh yeah, it was. She's talking about embroidery thread. So, but on an embroidery machine, you can what was I talking about? I just lost my train of thought.
No, you were trying to figure out why thread breaks.
Yeah, I know.
But I think you were going to where what you're using for a bobbin and winding your own
Oh,
bobbin.
yeah, winding your own bobbins. The tension isn't the same as a commercially wound bobbin, and you got to watch that. If your bobbin, like if the threads aren't, they'll wind like this, down and up, down and up. But sometimes they'll loop around it and get caught. That could cause a problem
Yeah,
too.
like if there's a snag in your bobbin and all of a sudden it doesn't, or a few snags in the bobbin, it can cause your thread to break. The other thing is that like for my machine, sometimes people think that they have to use the same thread as their top thread in the bobbin, and a lot of times embroidery machines prefer a finer thread in the bottom, the bobbin, than on the top, including the machines that we use. And so we often use pre-wound bobbins for our machines. But then some people want to have the same, if they're doing freestanding lace, the same color on the opposite side from the top color. And they'll try and wind a bobbin with the top thread. And sometimes your machine won't like that.
Yeah, my machine does not like a bobbin wound with Floriani thread, although that's the thread I use on the top.
So, I mean, what I've done occasionally, if I wanted to do that, if I did wind my own bobbin, let's say I was using red or something, I pick a regular sewing thread as of a color that matched the top thread and would use that. But most of the time, even if it says to match the color to your top thread, I often just use white, and same with Steve, because a lot of the times there's enough of the top thread that shows through the bottom that you wouldn't even notice.
Now, as a last resort, you could check your tension, but embroidery machine tensions on most of them now, they have an auto feature. It defaults to that. And the only time you really need to change your tension, if you need to change it all, might be if you're using a very specialized type of thread. Something that's maybe fairly thick, or something like a silk thread that's really slippery, or something like that. But even then, I don't know if I'd play around with the tension, because that can cause a whole lot of other problems. So, yeah. But I did some investigation on this business about oiling your thread, and it wasn't a one-off. There are tons of videos, and I have put the playlist of these videos, or the link to these videos, down in the show notes. I have not watched these yet because I just discovered them about a half an hour before we went to record today's episode. But like lubricating your thread, this one I'm really interested in because it's by Sewing Doc Academy. They're the people that I paid for the course to learn how to deep clean machines and take them apart and that kind of thing. And I kind of trust their opinion because they've been fixing sewing machines and things like that for years and years and years. So it'll be interesting to hear what they have to say. But there are some other ones here, and I notice that some of them have to do with long arms too. I don't think they're all about long arm machines. But there's quite a few. And there's products for this, like this silicone oil. So yeah, this is something I'd never heard of before, and until Betty brought it up, I've never done any research into it. So yeah, you might want to explore some of these as well if you're having a lot of problems that way. I'm just going to explore it out of curiosity more than anything else. But I've put the list of this page that shows all these videos down in the show notes if you're interested. Okay, so that's about it. Retreat update. Things are going along very nicely in my planning. I have 2 guest speakers all lined up. I don't know if I should tell you who they are, but I will. One of them is a subscriber, a longtime subscriber to our channel, who is a really masterful hand quilter. And she does beautiful, beautiful work. And she has agreed to be one of the speakers and to talk about that. Her name is Heidi. And I'm sure if you've been on our pop-up sew days or even on sew day with Stephanie and Stephen, Heidi has been there. So many of you will know who she is. The other one, I was thrilled when I got this person because I did it on a whim. I really didn't think this. I figured this person would write back and say, well, thank you very much for asking me, but I'm really, really busy right now. And that is John from Art East Company. You know, the kits like Alice in Wonderland, the 100 Acre Wood, Blowing Up Bunnies, Goats in Pajamas, all those kind of things. The one that's got a lot of little pieces for piecing. I know because I did one with cats on it. Well, John said he would love to. So I'm really excited about having John because I'm sure you've heard of his company. If you haven't, look it up. It's Art East Company. They're located here. They are Canadian. Both of my speakers are Canadian. Yes, proud Canadians. And they both come from Nova Scotia as well. So East Coasters as well. So I'm really excited that both of them agreed to do this. And all the information about how you register for the retreat. The retreat is free, but registration saves your spot on the Zoom because my license only handles about 100 participants and we fill up very quickly. And usually I can only handle about 95 or 96 because I have to leave a few spots for Walter and I on there as well and for my guest speakers. So yeah, but that hasn't hit the airwaves yet. You can't register yet for it. There's a procedure for doing this. And about 2 weeks before the date of the retreat, which is April the 26th, when the actual retreat is, actually about 4 weeks before that, all the information will go out about it. Then 2 weeks before that, the registration will open. So stay tuned. So you're not going to hear anything much more about it until we get to the end of March, the beginning of April for all that. But you have advance notice. See, that's what you get for watching So Chatty. Yep. If you hadn't, you wouldn't know. Okay. That's it. Anything you want to say? Any parting words? Any words of wisdom?
Nope. I don't know.
I don't know either. Okay. Have a great week. See you all later. Bye for now.
Bye for now.